it's more something that I try to live by, is to try everything and talk to everyone. That's the only way to really get close to culture and to get to know people and the vibe, and to also get you into a completely new zone. So that's what I try to live by when I travel.
What kind of traveler would you say you are?
So I'm definitely a free and open traveler. I really am desperate to kind of break out of my corporate shackles, if you will, and try to explore things in a way that gives me a lot of, I would say, hope, and spirit and creativity. And so, yeah, I get a lot from, just engaging with the people, on the ground, and learning directly from them.
Sound a lot like the kind of traveler I am, Andrea. Thank you.
Let's go. Where are we going to go?
You know, everywhere. Find if you
Take that till I get yours. Did you just knock her out?
Did I knock her out?
Sorry, Amanda. I think I missed your last question.
Moving on to Jeannie, but Barbara, can you mute yourself?
If you can, this is my mother-in-law, Jean Marie, but I think she's on Barb's platform. If you want to if you can put on, there you go.
There we go. Okay. Jeannie, what's your favorite travel quote and what does it mean to you?
My favorite travel quote is from Freya Stark, who's a seminal female solo journeyer. One can only really travel if one lets oneself go and takes what every place brings without trying to turn it into a healthy private pattern of one's own. And I suppose that is the difference between travel and tourism. To me, taking what it brings means being fully open to the culture and the experiences that you're going to be having there, and to learn about the culture so that you are prepared. Even your wardrobe is prepared to function fully immersed within that culture. I think what I take from that is never to impose my own ways on other people, even in my home. This is something that was a difficult transition for me. I was a head of a household. I always had my way, and this really recentered me and restructured how I interact with my world.
And I get a little taste for what kind of a traveler you are from that, but can you expand on that a little bit and tell us about what kind of traveler you are?
Sure. I travel with great purpose. I have a tendency to study where I'm going to be going. I like to study the geology and the cultures that arose within that geology, and the history and the events, the architecture, art history, and incorporate all of that into my travel experience so I can fully immerse myself in the landscape.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jeannie. And Jennifer, can you share your favorite travel quote with us and what it means to you?
I would have to say poet Mary Oliver's famous line, "What is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" And that really connects to how I view travel, which is about appreciating deeply and not taking for granted those really precious moments that we can have when we don't travel. But I think that when we're in a new environment, our senses are tuned in a way that allows us to really focus on these one precious moments that we have in the place that we're visiting. So
that's beautiful, Jennifer. Thank you. And can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of traveler you are?
Oh, well, most of my travels are really focused on outdoor adventure and wilderness immersion. I'm always...
Oh, you're muted suddenly, Jennifer.
Oh, sorry, it said the host muted me, but maybe it was a technological gremlin. What kind of traveler or adventurer am I? Yeah, really looking for connections with nature and with wild nature, especially whenever I travel. I go out of my way to get as deep as I can into wild places. So that's really my focus. I tend to avoid cities and civilization. So this time that we're in is fantastic for me, because I'm looking forward to traveling and being uh, as far away from the crowds as possible. And it's really changed a lot. I used to fancy myself this kind of rough backpacker. I wanted to do everything myself and I was really looking for the edge. And now I would say I actually am really appreciating having space held for me. I'm the kind of traveler, I'm not a diva at all, but I love having someone else organize the details. And I love going because then it allows me to really focus on the experience and I don't have to be, in my busy brain trying to figure out logistics all of the time, which is how I've traveled my whole life. So I'm appreciating this time of being the kind of traveler that, yeah, I like to be supported, and that's okay. Yeah,
Sometimes it's nice just to show up.
it is. It is.
So, Andrea, I want to go back to you. Can you tell me about one trip that has had the biggest impact on you in terms of mind, body, spirit renewal? That is the theme for us in January, renewal.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I had just a incredibly transformative experience when I had the chance to go on a mission trip to Indonesia, to this really tiny island called Flores, which is in Indonesia. And I actually had the great fortune of doing this trip with Tom Zara, who is Carolyn Ray's partner. And we went to go and help in inoculating kids. And we thought we were going on this mission to be helping them and teaching them. And what happened was the experience was so incredibly formative. They ended up teaching us more about the world, I think, than anything else. And I learned a lot about fear and vulnerability. These children would line up for shots. They were excited to get them. They were excited to be, to get to know us. They took me all around the little communities. And although I didn't speak their language and they didn't speak mine, we sang songs together, nursery songs and things in different languages. And all the kids would want to hold my hands and we would run with their flip-flops, and they took me all around their communities. Tom was doing some interviews and things with some of the community members, and he was also holding the roosters that were given to us as community presents. And so he had a rooster in one arm and a rooster in a second arm. And eventually he became united with these children, and we were sort of parading around. And it was just a fabulous experience in terms of the things that I think that we were able to give back in terms of helping the health of these small communities. But there was so much joy, even though, in all of these communities, incredibly impoverished. They had next to nothing, but they were some of the happiest children I've ever met. And the mothers were just so engaged because we were helping their children. And I think that's, even if you don't speak a language, if you can one mother can smile and smile at another mother and tell her she's beautiful. She might not know the language, but she can tell by your intonation. And we all celebrate that universality, that we just don't want our kids to go to, we want our kids to be safe and joyous and all those kinds of things. And so it taught me all of that and more.
And you may not have gone with renewal in mind, because sometimes we go on a trip because we're burned out and we need to renew ourselves. But how did you experience renewal on the back end when you came back?
Yeah, I think it was just a very deep sense of gratitude. Ironically, we went during the Thanksgiving period, and I was feeling guilty leaving my family behind. And yet going through this experience gave me this deepened sense of who I am as a mother, as a global citizen, as someone that can actually contribute so much more. The world is such a big place, and my eyes were certainly opened. But at the same time, it just made me realize that every single person can contribute something in a way that's truly magical.
Absolutely. It's all about the exchange. Thank you so much, Andrea. Jeannie, how about you? What's the one trip that was the most transformational for you in terms of mind, body, spirit renewal?
Was to northern New Mexico to a natural hot springs and mineral springs called Hoyo Caliente. I had been through a very toxic and great hardship in my life and rebuilt, and all the toxins and stress of all those years had built up, and I really needed space and I needed solitude to think and process and heal. And I wanted this to be connected with the sacred somehow. I wanted a sacred journey. So years before, I had been driving through New Mexico and I saw a sign for Hoyo Caliente. And I knew, I had a premonition I was going to go there one day. And I looked into that place, and it turns out that the local Puebloan peoples there to this day and over eons have considered this a very sacred space. And the people who own, operate, and work there also consider this sacred. So I went, and it was unbelievable. The experience of soaking in hot, deep water, sometimes at night under the stars alone, was the most primal experience. I was able to go very, very deeply. This is not a part of the ordinary world when you're there. It's like you are outside of the world. You are outside of yourself looking down. I began to see the lessons of the hardships. I began to understand the motivation, the dynamics, and the pain of people, and that drives them to say and do cruel things. And that the only way to overcome that is to forgive. I was able to integrate some lost pieces of myself, to heal and reintegrate neglected things and lost things. I think one of the most primal things to do is to go to the mud baths. You cover yourself, hair, head, feet, everything in mud. And then you lay in the hot desert sun and you let it bake into a shell around you. It's like all the toxins just pull out of yourself, and you can just feel this holy, sacred, warm peace enter your soul. You really connect to that divine spark in there. And after it's hardened, you crack it, and you peel it off. And then you take a shower outside. It is completely a rebirth experience. It is unbelievable. And if this sounds familiar, it's because I based this journey on the mythic hero's journey. I don't know if you've ever read Joseph Campbell, but I did it with an intention set for healing. I had my allies. I had love and compassion and forgiveness. I had my enemies. That was ego. Anytime your feelings are hurt, there's your ego. You didn't get what you wanted. And I had self-doubt was an enemy, and especially poor self-esteem. I had a talisman that was really special. It was my long past grandmother's rosary. And through that, I truly felt the ancestral women whose shoulders I was standing on with me and supporting me. I had a mantra, and that was the novena that I had been saying at that time. And I know I felt a healing presence. And I just felt like it was like an Archangel Raphael healing presence. My mentors were Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements, and Wayne Dyer's book, The Shift. I was reading that periodically and even listening to it in the car on the way there. So you enter the water, and your pain leaves, and your muscles turn into joy jelly. You go through this rebirthing process, and then you go to the spa. There's you really heal and pamper. I would really recommend some massage of your choice, but they have an herbal wrap, and then they wrap you in a warm blanket. You're like a big love burrito. And I was really able to make some inner changes that really shifted. I felt an inner shift right there. I can identify the moment.
That's so beautiful, Jeannie. And you've gone back to Hoyo Caliente many times over the years with your husband.
Yeah, about every year. I've taken my sister there when she went through a tragic breakup, unexpected. And she had to start over very quickly with just what she had in her car, basically. And she definitely found healing there. My husband had never been to a spa and thought it was very foo-foo. He loves it. He likes to go back with me now. So I can go every year. Often though, I've taken other women there for healing. And as a result of my experiences there, I've begun taking other women on sacred journeys. Just once for each woman, because after that, she has to do it alone.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you, Jeannie. Jennifer, tell me about your most transformational mind, body, spirit renewal trip.
Wow. It was hard to choose one, because I feel that I almost always bring that deep intentionality to my travels for renewal and for holistic kind of experience. Um, but the story that I've shared publicly before, that I feel was really the turning point for me, where perhaps it sounds dramatic, but adventure travel really saved my life, I believe. About 15 years ago, I was walking with a limp. I couldn't lift my hands above my head. And I was going downhill pretty fast. I had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And, I didn't really believe that there was a future for me that wasn't in a wheelchair. So I had a lot of fear at that time, and a lot of uh, just confrontation with my own, uh, just afraid that I wouldn't be able to do all the things that I dreamed I'd be able to do. And so someone I trusted, who's very close to me, was going on this trip a few months after I was diagnosed. And they were going on a trip to Nepal to trek to the base camp of Mount Everest. And it was just in a passing conversation, his dear friend said, "Hey, why don't you come?" And my first response was, "No frickin' way," because I'm a sick person. I can't, like, I'm walking with a limp. How can I trek to Mount Everest? That was the craziest idea. It was just completely off the table. And so, days and weeks after that conversation, it just kind of stayed like a little thorn in my mind, you know? And somehow I did one night I did a long meditation, and I got this message. I don't know what I would call it, but I felt like it was a calling. And the message was, do what a healthy, a healthy, not a sick person would do. And the idea just completely dominated my mind that if I did this trip, if I traveled to trek in the Himalayas, it's going to be a month-long trek to the base camp of Mount Everest. And I had this idea that if I did this, I would be okay. And I just latched onto this belief, this hope, right? I feel like it's just hope. And it wasn't rational. There was no good reason why I would be able to do this. But I trusted my friend who invited me, and they were very experienced. So again, I allowed myself to be held and supported. And a few months later, I went, and feeling the whole time like I didn't have to finish it. I didn't have to make it to the destination. I just had to get on the trail. I just had to show up. And whatever it was that was pulling me there might pull me to the next step and the next step. And who knows, but I was just going to show up and let life move me. And so I did. And it was really hard. And I was giving myself, injections of drugs the whole way up the mountain because I was taking the medicine for the disease. And so I was having quite a time getting myself up there, and I wasn't fast, but I did it. I did it, and I had an experience when I hiked to the top of Kalapatar, which is pretty much the highest place in the planet you can walk without strapping on crampons and climbing Mount Everest, which I wasn't about to do. And so I was on top of the world. I felt as high as I ever imagined I would get. And I saw the sunrise over the top of Mount Everest with my own eyes. I saw the sunrise over that peak, over the mountain that is called Chomolungma, the mother goddess of the world. And I had this epiphany that my story was changed in that moment, that I wasn't a sick person. I was badass. I was strong. I was standing looking at the top of Mount Everest with my own eyes, and I got myself there. And when my narrative changed and when I let go of the ego, that you speak of, the victim consciousness, that I'm just waiting to go downhill and end up in a wheelchair. Suddenly I had a completely different story that I owned, which was I was going up and I was getting stronger and I was impressive and I felt this confidence. And so, longer story short, I came back down from that mountain. I did a lot of concrete things to change my life, and get healthier. And so that was 15 years ago, and um, I consider myself to be in remission. I'm very healthy, and I've climbed many mountains since and done lots of things that I never really thought that I would do. So for me, that trip was hugely transformational and renewing. And I really believe that if I hadn't have done that trip and just showed up and let myself take the next step towards the mother goddess of the world, that I think that I would have a very dark dark fate. So yeah, I just feel really grateful for the renewal that came from that trip, more than anything I think I've done.
Jennifer, that story is amazing, and you are amazing. It's proof positive that when you shift your perspective, you can shift your life. Whenever you think something is impossible, it's really about thinking I'm possible, and that's exactly what you did there. It's a
Well,
beautiful.
when people say, oh, this is crazy, and I hear it all the time, oh, it's crazy, I can't. I mean, if it's crazy, that's a sign that it's good. Do crazy. We should all do more crazy, because it was absolutely irrational and crazy for me to take that trip. And so when I hear a crazy idea, I'm like, ooh, listen to that inner yes, yes, yes. And if you feel it, that means it's for you. Go for it.
Absolutely scared and excited. That's what you should always be.
Mm.
Thank you. My next question, ladies, is if you could go back in time as the traveler you are today and give some pieces of wisdom and advice to your much younger self, what would you say, Andrea?
So I would say learn every foreign language you can, even if it's just a little bit, to be able to converse and have that sort of door open slightly. One of my favorite travel friends and greatest friends ever is here with us tonight, Janelle Kranak, and we had a chance to do one segment of the Camino de Santiago. And we share a love of language. We both speak French. We both speak some Spanish. And I think that the experience that we had together in all kinds of places, and in France and in Spain in particular, and then we've been in Cuba accidentally and some other places as well, has been so much more enriched, because we were able to kind of meet people where they are and share stories and history, and the comments that both Jeannie and Jennifer shared about, looking at all of the things that make up culture. They're just that much more rich, having had a chance to learn a little bit. So even if it's just, learning from some of the apps that are there, just that intentionality around opening the door helps.
And how do you think you've grown as a traveler since you were younger to now?
So I think that I definitely was afraid to travel, in particular by myself at the beginning. And then I sort of made this leap that allowed me to realize that it's the things that that scare you the most that are probably the ones that are most transformative at the same time. And in some ways, it's a blessing to be able to travel on your own, and to be able to make those decisions, meet new people, change your plans, be open to the universe, all of those kind of things. And yet it can be scary at moments as well.
Absolutely. But that freedom you experience in the first time is a heady drug.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
Thank you, Andrea. Jeannie, how about you? Words of wisdom to your younger self.
My younger self would be the same I would give to any young woman now. It's really easy to find these very low cost vacations that are all inclusive, and a lot of seeing young women who are able to afford these. But if there's any kind of an emergency, they had no backup, they had no ready cash, is to always fund your trips with an extra fund. Never underfund a trip. Have a charge card that is dedicated as your emergency fund, and understand that your health insurance isn't going to be accepted at a hospital wherever you're going. You're going to need to pay for that. And always have enough money to get home. Worst case scenario, you no longer have a place to stay. You no longer have a ticket to get home. Something happens, your phone disappears. Be prepared for that. Be ready. Think of the worst case scenario and prepare for it before you go.
Absolutely. Words of wisdom to any traveler, not just the younger set. We can forget these things as adults too. Thank you so much, Jeannie. Jennifer, how about you? Words of wisdom to your younger self.
Oh, I feel like when I was younger, I was a bit too preoccupied with what I felt like I should accumulate, what I should have. Like I should have a nice house, you know, and I should have nice things and a car, and I think I felt this societal pressure. Um, you know, I was living in the city and I was trying to keep up, you know, have the clothes and and so I think my priorities weren't as much towards spending my money on experiences. And so, you know, in the last 15 years especially, you know, I don't care about having nice things, you know, like material things. I spend all of my money, like I will go and spend whatever money I want on travel because that's actually what I value the most. So I, you know, I don't have jewelry. I don't have a, you know, a fancy house. Like I really feel like my advice to that younger Jennifer would have been just do it, do all the things and enjoy it and don't apologize because, you know, your credit cards maybe are being, you know, being used, or you can't afford that, you know, that fancy wardrobe. Like just get out there and live your one wild, precious life now. And that's what I'm going to remember. And yeah, I think I would have given her more of a talking to.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jennifer. My next question for you guys is, when is a time that fear has kind of held you back or you were afraid on a trip? How did you handle it, Andrea?
So I traveled for a month around Europe by myself after I'd lived in Spain for my junior year abroad. And there were a number of times where I was afraid. And I realized that I needed to always be in control of my things and to make sure that I looked like a confident, badass traveler, even if I was feeling a little shaky, that I wanted to make sure that my backpack was sort of half full. So that I was always in control of it. And I didn't ever want to have a situation where a guy was coming over and saying, do you need help with that bag? I wanted to be able to be like, no, this one, like she's fierce and she's cool. But I think that, you know, there's a solidarity in sort of meeting other women, certainly as you go on trips. And I think some of my favorite times have been meeting complete strangers that have become my soul sisters. And especially on that trip in particular, I stayed in some convents and I would meet other solo women travelers. And sometimes we'd continue on a journey that was maybe started by one of the other travelers. Other times I would just get their recommendations and want to go off again and meet others. But I think there is, you know, there's power in the pack for sure. And so the more that we can find other soul sisters, that there are any number of reasons that we can draw strength from one another, whether it's, you know, protecting ourselves from evil or liberating ourselves from the evil that sort of resides inside of us. There's tremendous learnings, I think, when you're on the road.
Absolutely. Definitely power in the sisterhood. Thank you, Andrea. Jeannie.
Well, I think my lesson was learning to be resourceful. I was on a journey and I was going through Wyoming and wanted to take a little side trip up into the Bighorn Mountains to see a really sacred place, the Medicine Wheel. And I got there and I was the only person there. So I walked, you have to walk about a half mile to get back to it. And as I was walking, my hackles rose. It was like the hair was standing on end. I felt like something was looking at me, and I realized there was a predator in the area. So I turned around and started walking back to my car, and I took my coat, made myself big, and did wild animal calls and looked over my shoulder and all the way back to my car. I started to see mountain lion tracks. And then right before my car, I saw my boot print with a mountain lion track on it. So I got in my car and I started my car. It was an old Scout driving, and rather a Bronco, and it broke down. So I had to wait till it stopped steaming, and I had to actually get out and see what I could do. There's no cell service there. I'm on my own.
Oh.
So I thought, okay, what would MacGyver do? So I took pantyhose from my suitcase and wrapped it around the torn hose. And I went into the bottom of my purse and I found paper clips. I was able to wire back down and twist tight that hose, started my car, and it got me to the bottom of my mountain. I was able to write my AAA number and the 800 number and hand it to a passing car, who 90 minutes later, a tow truck showed up. And by noon the next day, I was back on the road. But it was definitely to think calmly and use your inner resources.
Wow, Jeannie, talk about women being creative, resourceful, and
what choice do I have? I'm with my hood up looking overweight to be jumped on by a mountain lion.
kudos to you for that. Wow. Jennifer, time you were afraid and how you handled it.
I think that my style for a long time was just to jump in the deep end, and just, I think that especially after that trip to Nepal, I became really, really risk oriented. I maybe just felt like this, inflation of confidence. But I started to do things that I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I'm lucky that I survived that. And so, doing kayak expeditions, and, hiking in really deep wilderness. And I remember a lot of experiences where I thought, wow, I'm really surprised that it didn't go bad. And I didn't really have a solid enough skill set at times, and safety net, plan B. And so now I think I've matured enough, because it's also my work to create that safety net and plan B for the women who come on our Wild Women tours. So I appreciate so much more risk management. Whereas 15 years ago and before, I think I did just a lot of crazy things. And what my first, just as an example, my very first time kayaking, my second time, actually, my first time was in Canada, but my first time going on a kayak expedition was on the Nepali coast in Kauai. And so I kayaked on the Nepali coast, which was about 11 hours straight kayaking. And it was in the end of October, and it was not a smart time to be kayaking there. I was riding white tips for 10 hours. And I was an absolute beginner kayaker. And I had this, I'm going to do it because I'm brave. And when I think of because there's no rescue there's no roads along the Nepali coast. So if you tip, I mean, it's cliffs, and there's really very few places where any kind of rescue could be mounted. And so again, I just kind of jumped in and said, I want to do this, so I'm going to go for it. And I'm very, very grateful that I didn't get into more trouble. And so I can think of those kinds of experiences that I had a lot of enthusiasm, but I just didn't have the groundedness at sometimes to be safe. So I'm over that now. But yeah, I think that kind of enthusiasm can definitely the pendulum can swing too far.
Absolutely. At least you swung it back the other way into having a risk management plan in place.
Yeah. Well, we learn by our, the lessons. I mean, we're all here to live the tale, but yeah, there were many times where I think this could have very easily gone another way, and I wouldn't have made it, which is why I think I feel so passionately now about when you travel, go with a plan B, be supported, have that, have the people who are skilled with you. There's no shame in that. I think I thought it was shameful to ask for help. And isn't that a woman thing, right? Oh, I can do it myself. I'm like, I felt like there was something wrong with me saying, I need to be supported in this. And it was kind of a reflection of my strength and independence as a woman. And I'm over that now. And I love being supported by other women. I mean, that's kind of a big shift for me. Is I love going out and doing those really extreme kind of adventures, and I do that still often, but I do it now with women who've got my back, and I love that. And I don't feel that kind of yeah, that ego. It's ego, right? That's what gets us in trouble. So
thank you so much, Jennifer. So my next question focuses on, sometimes our best adventures end up being the misadventures, the times when something went wrong. So can you tell me about a time when something did go wrong on a trip and how you handled it, Andrea?
So I think I went against one of the things that I shared earlier, which was learn a little bit of the local language. And I was in Germany, and I was trying to find my way back to the train station, having gone to Dachau and had a pretty emotional experience. So I was a bit of a bit of a damsel in distress already, if you will. And so I was trying to find the station, and I didn't know the word for station. And so I went up to a group of people, and I was trying to use my knowledge of Spanish or French and hoping that would help me through. So trying to pronounce anything that rhymed, that sounded like station, stazione, all those things, not realizing it was Bahnhof. And so I went to the extreme of acting like a train, saying chugga chugga choo choo. And people thought that was very funny, but it was not helpful at all in my mission. So I actually don't remember how I actually found. I think someone finally just gave me a map and said, "Here you go." But anyway, it's one that it sort of sticks with me, right? Those are the times where you have any kind of issue, and I find this definitely with my family. You can plan all these extravagant, marvelous things, but the only experiences that we talk about and we really remember are the ones that have some kind of a failure or some kind of a twist and a turn to it right at the end of the day. So I guess some of that's good as well.
Yeah, it's important to mess up sometimes. That's what memories are made of.
That's right.
Jeannie, how about you? A mess that turned into something wonderful, maybe.
It was my first solo journey overseas. I flew into Heathrow, and I was very tired and jet lagged, and I went over to the car rental station and rented a car, and they gave me a brand new, never been used before Mercedes SUV. So I took out the maximum insurance on that, because this was going to be my first side driving on the left side of the road, and all those roundabouts in London I had to get through to get outside to where I was going in the Cotswolds. So the gentleman came, I had him show me everything in the car. I was very thorough and confident. When I pulled out, within a minute and a half or 2 minutes, a lorry was barreling at me, and I pulled off to avoid being hit, and I hit a curb and went off onto the side of the car and then rolled back. All of the bags went off, and I take Coumadin for a blood clotting disorder, so I had the most spectacular bruises immediately. I did the bobbies. The police are amazing. I went into the people who were working in the car rental place, saw the whole thing and came out to me. I went inside, and we had tea with all the agents. And the hard thing was they gave me another car, and I had to walk back out again with the same gentleman, go through the things, and I was fine from there. But that was a very, very hard thing to get back in that car. I ended up being just fine within a day. I was so used to the roundabouts and driving on the left side and those tiny little 1-lane roads over bridges with another car coming at you. I got really used to it.
Wow, that's gross, Jeannie. Jennifer, how about you? A misadventure?
Um, it's kind of a misadventure, but I guess I wanted to talk a bit about how when I've gone on certain trips, I have this story of how everything is supposed to go and feel. And it's usually about pleasure. And it's usually about wanting to have the eat, pray, love story. Yes, there's some adversity, but really it's about feeling good, right? And so I can think of a couple of, well, maybe more than a couple, but experiences on my travels where it really hurt and brought up like some deep emotional stuff. And it's hard to let that in because the whole industry is travel industry is about telling you go on vacation and feel good. And so I had did a yoga teacher training, and everyone always talked about Mother India. You know, you have to go to India if you enjoy yoga. um, India is a must. And I resisted going to India for a long time because I felt like when I go to India, it is going to ravage me, right? And it's not going to be fun. And so I had this sense that if I went to India, I was going to confront some things that were really uncomfortable for me to deal with. And so I did end up going for work, and I encountered a woman, and I think it was part of what was coming up for me was about, you know, my privilege. I have a background in international development, anti-poverty work. I feel really uncomfortable with a lot of my privilege. And so when I went to India, and I had confronted this in other places, but India felt like it was another level. So I went to this project being run by women who were survivors of acid attacks. You may have heard of it. It's called Shiros. And so I was going to learn about the project and how Wild Women Expeditions could support it. And I met this beautiful, there's no other word, beautiful girl named Nero. And we had this really just lovely connection. And we sang to each other, and we just sat and sang, and she sang these beautiful she loved to sing, and I told her I love to sing. And so we just sat. I don't speak any of her language. She didn't speak any English, but we sat and we sang for like an hour together, holding hands. And I looked at her and I thought, I can see that her face was very disfigured. And I looked at her and I felt this beauty, and I felt this trust in my own beauty that doesn't come from not having, you know, what she had experienced was just unspeakable. But yet I could see her beauty, and I felt like I connected with something that went much deeper than I ever really allowed myself to see. And so I wanted to share that because often when I think of the challenges of travel, it's easy to think of the near misses of logistics and, you know, and those kinds of physical. But for me, I was really afraid, and I think I was at risk of going to India and not allowing myself to really see the beauty within some of that struggle, you know. And we have it in Canada, we have it everywhere, but I think India is a deep place. And I knew that going there would bring up some emotional work that I needed to do about my sense of self, about my sense of beauty and self-worth. And so when I had this exchange with her, it absolutely just shattered me and broke my heart open. And it was the best part of the whole trip, just that singing a song with her in Agra. So yeah, I wanted to share that because the emotional kind of challenges I think are really important to acknowledge too. It's not just about, you know, the practical stuff.
Absolutely. And it's
Yeah.
a life-changing thing when we can experience the joy of someone who has gone through so much. And
Yeah.
it's just simple, beautiful joy.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I want to move on to some travel tips because our community loves tips. So Andrea, can you share your best travel tip with everyone?
So let's see, my best travel tip is to do something that I typically don't do, which is celebrate practicality. And I know Jeannie was talking before about logistics and things like that. I feel like if you don't think through some of the many different options, that it can get in the way of all the freeing, sort of liberating parts of travel. So the more that you can kind of get those elements out of the way, you can go crazy on your own playground. So it's not something that I typically talk about, being practical. In fact, my family won't believe that those words came out of my mouth. But especially if I'm doing it alone and doing some solo travel, it helps me.
Perfect. Thank you. Jeannie, your best travel tip.
I think the STEP program, the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program through the U.S. State Department, your embassies and your consulates will be able to help you if you had an emergency or if there was a national emergency where you're traveling. And never overlook your trip insurance, especially the kind that has evacuation and field rescue with a medical evacuation home. Understanding that your health insurance isn't going to be any good, being prepared for that. The other thing is so simple, have an extra pair of glasses and your eyeglass prescription. If I really need glasses, so you can't count on your contact lenses every day. Imagine that your wallet, your phone, your backpack, and your luggage are missing. Prepare for it. It could happen always. And the last one I think would be having an international driver's license. They're starting to expect that in more and more countries when you rent a car. That's kind of a shift that's occurred a little more recently. And finally, having that 220-watt appliances to do your hair. Don't even bother with those adapters. Don't even bother. That's about it.
Those are a wealth of good tips. Thank you for those, Jeannie. And Jennifer, how about you?
I would say, there's many years where, again, just really stubborn, independent, I'm going to do it all myself. I booked my own flights, and I thought, well, I'm not going to spend $40 on a travel agent. I can go online and book my own. Mm-hmm. And I could, and I did. But I think that this past year, the experience that we had in the early part of last year with the pandemic, as quickly as it escalated in March, I've had so many experiences where I've been in the airport, 2:00 in the morning, my flight got bumped, and I'm on the phone crying, talking to my travel agent at the flight center, who we partner with at Wild Women Expeditions, talking to her saying, Megan, get me the hell out. And having had the experience of, I was on the phone at 3:00 in the morning while we had women in Ecuador and in Morocco and a bunch of places where they wanted to get the hell out because things were starting to turn, and to feel like if these women were on their own, and I knew other people who were solo travelers, and I'm not against solo traveling at all, go for it, do it, but having those connections with professionals who have your back, I know that I played a major role in getting some women home. And I know that our partners, our professional agents at the flight center who were on the phone, working their connections, the middle of the night, trying to get, make things happen. I never appreciated so much that I had activated those resources for my own travels, and then, to have that professional experience. So again, solo travel is great, but book your flights with a travel agent, because you never know. A lot of people say that they can't get Air Canada or Delta or whatever on the phone, and they're getting the runaround. I have my agent's home phone number and I'm getting responses and I'm getting refunds and I'm getting service that if I was just talking to some person at a call center, I'd be waiting months. So I really think that it's worth it to get a travel agent, to book flights and get that professional support. Depending on what kind of travel you're doing, it could make all the difference. And I've seen many examples of that.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good reminder that traveling solo doesn't mean going it alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we want to open it up to questions from the audience. So if you do have a question, if you want to type it in the chat or use the raise your hand feature, we will address it as we go. We've eaten a little bit into the Q&A time, but we can go a little bit over if you do have questions. We'd love to hear them. In the meantime, I want to close off and ask you guys, what's the biggest lesson you've learned from travel? And maybe you can keep it short, so if questions come in, we have time to answer them. Andrea.
I think the biggest lesson that I've learned is just that the world is very big, but that we can make an impact. And certainly one of the trips I haven't had a chance to talk about is the one that I did with Carolyn in building schools in Kenya, and the love that we got from, in particular, the women there, and the students was just beyond. And so I always try to encourage my kids to look out for every opportunity that they can make, even though that, you know, sometimes you might feel like we're too small to make a difference, that you really can. And it's powerful to feel it through travel.
We had a question come in from the community. Where's the first place you'll go when you can travel again?
Mine will be the Camino for sure. It's a very simple experience, although I've gone 3 different times to the Camino. It's a 6-week endeavor, so I'm only halfway there. So it's taken me 3 years to get halfway there. So who knows how many? Let's hope that it only takes me another 3 years, and it's going to start this summer. That's my crisscross applesauce.
Thank you, Andrea. Jeannie, biggest lesson travel has taught you?
Acceptance with empathy and compassion, and not to expect home away from home in someone else's. That country is their home, and to be very respectful of that home.
I like that.
The first place you'll go when travel is a thing again?
Actually, I'm going to northern New Mexico, but this time I'm going to 10,000 Waters in Santa Fe, and I'm meeting a friend there, and then I'm going to go from there back to Oyo Caliente.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jeannie. Jennifer, how about you? Biggest lesson travel has taught you?
To learn how to be a guest, and as you just said, you know, really to recognize the privilege of travel and to be humble in that you're going into someone's home. This is their community, their land, and just to check the diva out at the door and really come in as you would go into someone's house and be grateful and just keep that open mind of we don't always get to have our way, and that's perfect. It's perfect.
And what's your next travel adventure, Jennifer?
Oh, I have many many lined up in the next year. The one that I think is going to come up sooner, the biggest one, is to the Arctic. Where Wild Women Expeditions is doing a series of small ship expeditions to the Arctic and Antarctica as well. And so I'm going to, I really should experience the Arctic if I'm promoting it to everyone else. So I'm planning on going to the high Arctic above Baffin Island on a voyage from Greenland across the Arctic Circle to Baffin Island later this summer, I hope.
That sounds like a great adventure. Who would like to go to the Arctic? Raise your hand, everybody. With that brings us to the end of the show. I want to thank Andrea, Jennifer, and Jeannie for joining me on the inaugural episode of Solo Travel Wisdom tonight. I want to thank you for sharing your stories, your experience, and yourselves with us for the past hour. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in and choosing to spend your time with us. There are many things that you could be doing, and we're glad you chose to spend your hour with us. I'm walking away from this hour feeling inspired, and I hope you all are too. We are starting a new thing with our events. It's a pay what you can program with all proceeds going to charity. This episode, if you'd like to buy us a coffee, if you enjoyed it, you'll be given a chance to do that. Carolyn, I believe, is going to pop a link in, and we'll send out a post-event survey that will include the link as well. And this event is going to support the Butterfly Project. And maybe, Andrea, you can tell everybody a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I have not been to Nepal, I'm dying to go in part in support of the Butterfly Home, which is a home that was created for the children of imprisoned, primarily it's imprisoned mothers who were thrown in jail for any number of reasons, many of which don't make sense, unfortunately, with what's going on from a social justice perspective. But the Butterfly Home was started by a woman who started as a security guard in the prison, and she found that a lot of these, especially young children, were imprisoned with their mothers. And so she set up a home that was right next to the prison so that the kids could be raised. And it's continued to grow and flourish. And the older kids take care of the younger kids. They also get to see their mothers and gain a lot of respect. And when the mothers do come out, they're reunited. They always have a relationship with the Butterfly Home, but it's such a beautiful gesture for all of you to be donating to her, because the money goes a long, long way. And she's definitely in need of funding, especially during the pandemic. A lot of the funding that she'd gotten from other places in the world has sort of stayed more local, which makes sense somewhat, but it'll go a long way there. So thank you so very much.
Women supporting women is what JourneyWoman is all about. So we hope you will support that project. Until next month, this has been Solo Travel Wisdom by JourneyWoman with your host, Amanda Burgess. Good night, everyone. And thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Amanda.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much.
You're awesome. I'm going to be floating all night just listening to all this inspiration.
This was really fun.